What's good? It's your boy 2K here. Shout out to the movement and everybody who's moving with us. This should be a short video. I just want to discuss what a viewer was talking about in comparing the possibility of a Guillermo Rigondeaux comeback to that of Roberto Duran. You know, after Roberto Duran said no mas against Sugar Ray Leonard in their rematch in 1980, he still went on to fight guys like Marvin Hagler, Tommy Hearns, Wilfred Benitez, Vinny Pazienza, Hector Camacho. Hell, even had a third fight with Sugar Ray Leonard, right? But what I want you guys to understand is Guillermo Rigondeaux is no Roberto Duran. You know what I'm saying? And I'm not just talking about stylistically. I'm talking about in the way in which Guillermo Rigondeaux, how he's been treated as a fighter, right? Understand, when Roberto Duran said no mas to Ray Leonard, that was the rematch in a series of fights in which he won the first match, right? And then also understand that he was already seen as the greatest lightweight of all time by the boxing consensus when he fought him before he said no mas, right? Roberto Duran was already going to the Hall of Fame for what he did at 135. So he had already etched his name in stone. He already had the reputation. So when he said no mas, of course it didn't really have too many repercussions. One, because we don't have social media the way we have it today. You know what I'm saying? Two, because, like I said, he already had his name etched in stone, right? And three, to be real, Roberto Duran wasn't talking cash shit like Guillermo Rigondeaux was prior to the fight, right? And if he was, he had the ability to do so because he had already beaten Sugar Ray Leonard the first time, with Sugar Ray Leonard actually admitting that he was scared of Roberto Duran. Hell, I talk cash shit too. You know what I'm saying? But Rigo's situation, he was ostracized. Nobody wanted to see Guillermo Rigondeaux succeed, right? The major entities in the sport that have, you know, a lot of the power within the sport divided between each other, the networks, the promoters, etc. None of them wanted to see Guillermo Rigondeaux succeed, right? You got the fans that ostracized him because they listened to those powerful entities and their commentary and the articles that a lot of these dumbass media brown nosers write based on what those powerful entities have to say. They listened to what they said about Guillermo Rigondeaux, so the fans ostracized him, right? Then also, Guillermo Rigondeaux is still rather new in the game, right? Hell, he's done a lot, you know what I'm saying? In my opinion, he has an excellent resume. You know, Ricardo Cordoba, former WBA champion, you know what I'm saying? He beat the likes of Tion Kennedy, Willie Casey, guys who were highly touted prospects, Roberto Marroquin. All three of those guys were highly touted prospects that Guillermo Rigondeaux beat them and deterred their careers, right? He beat Rico Ramos, who was an undefeated WBA super champion at bantamweight at the time. He was the top nigga there, right? He beat him, gave him his first loss, actually deterred his career as well, right? Joseph Agbeko, former two-time IBF 122-pound champion. You know what I'm saying? And then, of course, Nonito Donaire, the 2012 Fighter of the Year. And he's also, I think he's a 5-time champion in 3 weight classes, if I'm not mistaken. Started fighting at 112 and moved up to 126 eventually, right? So he's got a decent resume. He's got a decent resume, but he only has 18 fights. You know what I'm saying? Whereas Roberto Duran, I don't know how many fights he had, but he, like I said, he was already established as one of the greatest lightweights to ever do it before he said no mas. So he was revered before he said no mas, and that allowed him to be revered after. People were like, well, he did quit, we hate it, but he still has a legacy that he's already implanted in the sport of boxing. Rigo doesn't have that. So you can't possibly say, based on that, that Rigo is going to be able to make a turnaround in his career and come back in the same fashion as Roberto Duran. The situations are totally different here, man. Look, the WBA has already stripped him. Rigo's a regular dude now. Understand that the reason why Rigo had a minute amount of clout is because he held a belt. You know what I'm saying? That's what actually kept Rigo semi-afloat, because he held a belt and he had fucking mandatories, right? Now he's just a regular fighter. He don't have no mandatories. Fighters can just duck the shit out of Rigo now just because they feel like doing it. They were doing that before, but when he had a title, he had something to bring to the fucking table, right? He could have been like, hey, if you want this fucking title right here, you gotta fight me, nigga, because I am the fucking champion, right? If you want to be WBA champion sitting at the #1 contender spot, you gotta fight me, nigga. That was the clout that he had, the minute amount of clout that he had when he was champion, when he had a belt. Moises Flores was not gonna fight no fucking Guillermo Rigondeaux if he didn't have a belt and if he wasn't the mandatory, right? That's why that fight even happened. Just look at the fight. Flores scared than a motherfucker. That fight, you know what that fight remind me of, man? That fucking fight remind me of Mike Tyson versus Trevor Berbick. And I'm not talking about, I'm not talking about how, the fighters fight or anything like that. All four of those fighters have totally, 4 different styles. I'm talking about how Trevor Berbick was so afraid that he tried to overwhelm Mike Tyson. Like he overdid his output. You know what I'm saying? That's what Moises Flores was trying to do to Rigo. As soon as the bell rang, this nigga ran at Rigo and was throwing all these wild ass dumbass shots at Rigo, and he wasn't even hitting the nigga. He couldn't touch him, right? Every shot, behind every shot, he was trying to kickstart his confidence. That's what that means, people. When you got the nigga yelling in the ring and shit like that, he's trying to kickstart his confidence. And that's what Moises Flores was trying to do. This nigga was terrified. But the only reason why he got in the ring with him is because Rigo held a belt that he was the mandatory for. So now he's a regular nigga. He's a regular nigga that really didn't put his stamp on boxing to the point where a lot of his fans will continue to back him after saying no mas, like fans did for Roberto Duran, right? Rigo, regardless of the fact that he is still one of the more talented fighters in the sport, he hasn't done enough to be in the Hall of Fame yet. The Amateur Hall of Fame, absolutely, right? What is his amateur record like? 463 wins and 12 losses. One of the greatest amateurs of all time. 2 Olympic gold medals, right? The record for Olympic gold medals is 3. Laszlo Papp, Teofilo Stevenson, and Felix Savon, the only 3 fighters in amateur boxing history to only get 3 gold medals. And the first one to do it was Laszlo Papp. I think he was a fighter out of Hungary, right? So he's only 1 gold medal away from, being named with those guys as having the most gold medals in Olympic boxing history. And the only reason why he didn't get his 3rd gold medal is because he defected from Cuba to turn professional, right? It's the only reason why, because he would have easily gotten a gold medal in the 2008 Beijing Olympics if he would have joined. But he wanted to defect and he wanted to turn professional. He defected with Arislan Delora, right? So, but that doesn't translate over to the pros. You still have a separate career as a professional. And when we look at what he's done as a professional, while I do respect his resume, he's beaten some good guys, right? It's still not Hall of Fame worthy. So now you just a regular nigga with no stamp in boxing who quit in the biggest fight of your career, right? A fight in which you were at a status in boxing that said to you and to all the fans out there, hey, if you lose this fight, your career is over. That is the stigma or the label that you had on you coming into the fight, and you decided to exit that fight in the worst way possible, by quitting. I'm not saying he will not bounce back. a lot of things have happened in the sport of boxing. You know what I'm saying? A lot of things have happened in the sport of boxing. Caleb Truax just beat James DeGale. You know what I'm saying? A lot of shit happens in boxing. Saddam Ali just beat Miguel Cotto. A lot of shit happens in boxing. So I can't sit there and write Rigo off and say he'll never return. No. But I will give you a realistic opinion. And my realistic opinion is, if fighters were ducking him when he had a belt, right? Mandatories were ducking him when he had a belt. The WBA had to force Moises Flores into the ring when he had a belt. What the fuck you think's gonna happen when he's just a regular nigga as he is today? He's gonna be ducked, and there's not gonna be any type of backlash because he doesn't bring anything to the table. And to be quite honest, as I said before, as I mentioned in the first video of the two-part series I did on Rigo quitting, we've been ingrained as fighters to go out on our shield. And when you quit, like Austin Trout did against Jarrett Hurd, like Tony Harrison quit against Jarrett Hurd, like Victor Ortiz quit against Louis Collazo, right? How he quit against Andre Berto. When you quit, you are no longer taken seriously unless you have already placed a stamp in boxing that says you are already a surefire Hall of Famer. So you cannot compare Rigo's situation to Roberto Duran. Makes no fucking sense whatsoever. YouTube, do what you do in the comment section. Let me know what you think about this. Do you think Rigo will have the same type of backing and support that Roberto Duran did after he said no mas? This is Real Talk for real fans. 1.